Wonderful. So I would like to thank you for this, for your time and for your willingness to help us with the interviews. And that's great that um, southern part of America, South America, Latin America there is a very big continent, and I hope that we will go deeper in different countries and different aspects of life. And again, we encountered this topic, looked at this topic many times, that we have southern hemisphere, which is absolutely different and opposite to northern hemisphere. So you have the winter solstice in a couple of days. Of course, having been living in northern hemisphere for all of my life, and I haven't been, I think, to southern hemisphere at all. So it's sort of unknown land for me personally. And at the same time, I've heard a lot about Argentina and from you and from our common friends. So it would be great to learn more about this place, especially given the fact that it's not your homeland. So you wasn't born here, but you have chosen this land. And again, you have chosen it deliberately, consciously. And as you mentioned, you have been living here for 12 years. So it's definitely your home now. So maybe the first question is, why is it so? So how did it happen that you decided to move to another part, to the opposite part of the world from Europe, and settle in Argentina, Buenos Aires?
Well, first of all, Marina, thank you so much for this opportunity to engage with you and to co-create some meaning around what does it mean to be of place? What does it mean to identify with the land? What does it mean to be part of the urban thriving expression of a culture? And so, yeah, this is, and just also to say before I get to your question that indeed, I hope I'm not the only one from the southern hemisphere, but then again, hemisphere, right? Hemisphere is the half the planet. It's a half of our entire planet. And yet, only 10 to 12% of the human population lives here. So it's like, you know, 88 to 90% live in the northern hemisphere. Of course, that's because you have China and India, and also because the countries open up like this in the north geographically, and in the south they kind of form a point. You know, looking at all of the countries that are in the south, even though India is in the north, is also shaped like that, and so is Africa, which is a continent, not a country, and all of South America as well. But here I am in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. Argentina is right in between Chile and we have Uruguay and Paraguay, and then Brazil, which is the largest country in South America. Um, but we have a lot of coast as well that leads up to the areas before you get to Uruguay and then Brazil. And we also have the southernmost city in the world is located in Argentina. Ushuaia is the place from which all of the expeditions that go to Antarctica leave from there. All the public expeditions. There are some military expeditions that leave from other places in the world. Um, Chile's landmass goes slightly lower, but there are no habitable areas, no places where people live. So Ushuaia in Argentina is the southernmost city in the world. And another interesting fact before I get to answer your question is that Argentina is a very large country. If you were to put it on top of Europe, it would go from the south of Italy to the north of Finland
Mm.
as one country, right? And it's almost as wide as Europe is as well in terms of at least the eastern countries. Um, and yet a lot of Argentina is not populated. You know, you have 1/3 of the country lives in the capital where I live here. You know, that's 1/3 of this huge country it's a big city, but it's not the biggest in the world. And still a lot of people live there. What that doesn't mean necessarily that it's very crowded. It's not so much so. I'll get into telling you a little bit more about the city in a moment, but the um, the fact is that there are lots of areas of Argentina which are just open and uninhabited, and the pampas, as they're called, these long um, prairies, grasslands with less grass than more, bushes and shrub kind of vegetation. And then you go up to the Patagonia areas of the mountains, but a huge variety of things in Argentina. So I should answer your question, right? I can tell you more. I'll tell you more about what's happening in Argentina and how it is shaped and all those things because well, let me tell you one other thing because yes, you're right. We are here in winter. Today, I just checked before coming on and it's 10 degrees centigrade, which is for those dealing with Fahrenheit. Here we deal with centigrade as well. And that is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees. So I'm and we're in the middle of the day here now. It's 1:15 for me in the afternoon, and in fully into winter here. So how it's always fascinating to me that you're in summer and we're on the same planet but in different worlds. You know,
Mhm.
and I think this series what we are collecting here of stories from around the planet bring the different worlds into encounter. And I think that's very good for humanity to see itself and see each other. So, why am I here? I'm finally going to get to your question. I like the idea that I didn't come here, I didn't choose to live here, it chose me. And I like that idea. If you can listen to where you are, there's often a calling, and there's often a sense of this is the right place for now. And there are many reasons I'm here. I can tell you between love and my fiance is here. I will soon be married, hopefully this year. If not, then next year. There's a lot of bureaucracy in this. Uh, but there is also work. I came here because I was also invited to design and direct and then get accredited a doctoral program at one of the major universities. It's called the Buenos Aires Institute of Technology, which is, like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. This was the Buenos Aires Institute of Technology, and it has the same kind of profile and also same reputation within the country. And but they're being pretty much a polytechnic, very much in science and engineering and mathematics. And they wanted to have a program that also looked at the impact of science, technology, and the built environment, the engineered environment on society in the future. So they asked me to create a doctoral program on science, technology, and society kind of things. I called it leadership and systemic innovation because they gave me free choice to be able to name it and design it, and then I got it accredited and I ran it for 4 years. That was my contract, and now I'm no longer even teaching and working I am teaching at a couple of universities here, but mainly coming to doctoral student defenses. Other than that, I am working at a couple of international programs based in Italy, in Austria, and then my main activity now is actually based in California in the United States. But I managed to live here. So it's interesting to be able to be here and yet have my main areas of work in other places. Um, so coming here for work, for love, and once I'm here, I'm feeling very at home also because you pointed out I was born in Switzerland. Um, my mother is Swedish, but she was born and raised in Finland. My father was born in Hungary, I hope you're paying attention. There's a little quiz at the end. You should, yeah. Right? My father was born in Hungary. My parents have lived in Italy since I was 11 years old. My brother was born in Germany. My sister-in-law is from India, from Madras, from Chennai. Uh, and uh, and yes, so even though I was born in Switzerland, I'm not Swiss, or having spent much of my youth since I was 11 in Italy, not Italian. But all my education is from the United States, so I can speak fairly well. But all my education from the United States. Even though we were living first in Switzerland and then in Italy, my parents are very European and identify much more with Europe than with the United States. And this makes Argentina very comfortable for me because even though I spent 12 years in Mexico, in a very large city, it's the second largest city in Mexico, Monterrey in the north, um, I and Mexico is very much looking to this neighbor, the United States, as its kind of point of reference. Argentina doesn't do that. It looks to Europe and primarily to Italy, actually. Many Argentinians are either go to live in Italy or have come from Italy. Also Spain, just because of the language. And then in a kind of third place, it would be, I think, England. But much of the architecture and the ways of expression and the cultural habits are very similar to Italy. So that's another aspect of me feeling quite at home here because I feel actually less at home in the United States, certainly these days. Careful what you ask me. I'll just never stop. By the way, I'm having mate. Have you seen this?
Yeah,
Mate. This is the national drink, and I'll tell you more about it in a bit. But salud.
salute. That's also very interesting. So, um, what you might say about your connection to this land throughout these 12 years? So, as you told us how you came there and how this land was, I would say, uh, caring for you and very uh, generous in many ways. So, could you maybe recollect some specific cases when you maybe first felt at home at Argentina, or maybe you felt connected to this land and to this space of this uh, of this city in any way, be it culture or architecture or some events or maybe nature or people, anything. So when you deeply felt that, yes, I'm at home, yes, this is my place.
Well, I think there maybe is a combination of three things if I'm thinking about it. In the city of Buenos Aires, which is a huge metropolis kind of city, and I went to high school in New York City, it doesn't have the same height of buildings, but has the same kind of density of population, and also the multicultural aspect that New York City has, for example. People are more familiar with that perhaps than Buenos Aires. So there's a lot of different ethnicities here and different people from different places in the world. Um, it's not quite as culturally diverse as someplace like, let's say, New York or Rome or Paris or Tokyo. It has there's more. There are, for example, different restaurants you can go. You can find Chinese and you can find Japanese, you can find Indian, but not as much. The Argentines really like their food and they like their way of life, and there's a great pride. Most countries have that as well. Um, I found here this both the cosmopolitan aspect of the city um, and the way in which the habits of the people, you know, they're very familiar in the sense that it's very much like the Italians. They're very expressive, and it was again a sense of home. Um, but there are a couple of other things here, the architecture and nature. Let me mention those as well. So culturally, there's this aspect that is familiar, that felt like, oh, this is, yeah. And then the other aspects are the architecture. I walk around the city and I see so much, just it seems to me to be old architect. This is still the new world. It's not, I mean, no longer, right? But it's still considered that the Americas compared to Europe and Africa and Asia, um, and still the buildings and the architecture, and there's so much kind of um, artistic engagement in in the city and in this life. And I very much enjoy that as well, just walking around. I had a friend of mine who was an architect who came from Vienna actually to visit. And as she was walking around, she said, my goodness, all the buildings are so narrow. I never noticed that. I looked around, I said, no, that's normal. These are, it's a metropolis, and so there are a lot of tall buildings. But now I look around, and she was right. It's strange how narrow many of the buildings are. And some of them are very small and low, and some of them are tall, but they tend to be quite narrow. So it's interesting. It's a different kind of flavor. The other things to mention to you, Marina, I think there are two other things, is nature. It's an amazing green city. There's just, you walk almost every street, there are big trees. I mean, these are the small streets, not just the avenues. And then there are some streets that are so covered with trees that you see only the trees, like walking in almost in a little forest. Um, and so I really enjoy the greenery in the city. Of course, there are certain areas, the financial district, where, as in most cities, the green is of a different nature. It's the green money. Well, here the money is different colored as well. But and I think then the third thing to mention is that when I traveled a bit around the country, and again, the culture in the city is different. People talk about, and many countries is the same thing, how, oh yeah, you're a city folk, you're a city person, and the people from Buenos Aires have a very particular culture that is not the same as the pace of life, the degree of friendliness, the openness and connection also to nature that is in the rest of the country. Here, it's faster paced, people are more business oriented, and they live less in connection with the land because, again, it's in the city. I think it's pretty typical of most cities like that. And yet, when I went to an area called Bariloche, which is south and a little bit west, um, it just reminded me of Switzerland so much. It's colder, and they have these big mountains. Now, they don't have Alps, but they have these big mountains around a lake. And I'm like, goodness, it's just, and then the people there, you have people in certain little towns around the country where they speak only German, or oh, there's a Swiss town. There are people who've come from different parts of the world because Argentina is, I would actually think, one of perhaps the most open to people coming from um, other nations, other countries that come here sometimes as refugees, um, sometimes because they want to have a new life and start a different place. It's not as if they accept anyone without a problem, but it's very open compared to most places. People just come and establish their life here, and it's so you have a lot of little places around the country that are very culture specific from different places in different areas of the world, mainly from Europe. But yeah, did I answer the question? What called me here? Not sure.
Yeah, that's great. Yes. So, can you tell me more about this unique way of life? How you could maybe highlight what is it? Again, you sort of travel around the world, so you've been to a lot of different cities. What's what's the uniqueness? What if you would like to sort of to mention maybe top five, if it is possible, unique features of Buenos Aires? What it might be?
Well, we have both Maradona and Messi. I mean, just saying, and World Cup champions. This is not going to make a lot of friends for me in other countries, I know. But the point is, people are very engaged with sport here, particularly football or soccer, as it's called sometimes. Um, my goodness, I had to choose a team when I came here because everybody's like, "So, what team are you?" And if you say the wrong thing, you're not accepted into the group that's local because and every little neighborhood is very much oriented to a particular soccer team. So, for example, I'm living in an area now where my fiance is from another soccer team. She is supportive of another soccer team. So once a week or several times a month at least, there's a major game and in the evenings, and then we can hear the neighbors exploding. You know how I'm sure you've heard of this, particularly because of Latin America's goal. They just go on and on, right? And everyone shouts out the window this go. I mean, it's like the whole neighborhood erupts, and you can tell what the score is just because I'm working on other things sometimes, and boom, everybody is screaming, but like I'm thinking somebody got killed or something, but they're really screaming. So a lot of passion around that, a lot of passion around that. And that's, I think, maybe um, not so different from many other places, but it is particularly intense here. The pride of the sport, and particularly of soccer. Um, the other things that might be particular here to this way of life is, well, I'm having my mate, right? And this is a real tradition here. Um, it's so interesting. So mate is I don't know if you can see here. It's just this basically it's kind of like grass. That it's not a very special um, uh, plant. Um, it is, of course, special in the sense that they only cultivate a certain kind. You can't just put anything in here. So yes, but it grows quite quickly, especially in certain areas throughout South America. And I can tell you things about South America as a whole, if you would like. We can talk about the culture and the general things. But here, particularly in Argentina and in Uruguay, uh, mate is a mate culture, and I feel, Marina, that this is something that could be exported, not the mate. But by the way, mate is the gourd. This is the mate. The stuff inside is called yerba, which it means herbs. It's just like grass. That's what it's called. Okay. But the mate is the gourd. It's usually made out of like a kind of a pumpkin like small, right? Of this size gourd. And that's the traditional way. And then you have a bombilla, which is a metal straw, which has a filter at the bottom, and you can then you just pour this in. You pour the water in it. You have a thermos, and then you keep pouring this in. And there's a whole tradition. I've learned the hard way. You can't move the straw. That would be very bad. You don't say thank you when somebody passes you the mate. You accept it. If you say thank you, it means I'm done. So just accept it casually. That's all, without any just you can nod, but thank you means no more. And then everyone passes this around and you drink and you don't wipe off the bombilla, but you try to also drink it in such a way that when it comes to the end, you can hear the air coming through, which means you've emptied it. You haven't added anything. So it's something where it creates community. You pass this around, there is trust. In a family, if somebody has a cold, you have it anyway because you share everything. If you're in another community, a work environment, and you're feeling unwell, you don't have the mate because you care for everyone else too. But it is such a tradition that if you're feeling sad, you invite your friend, let's have a mate. If you just had a celebration because you had a baby, let's have a mate. If you're bored, let's have a mate. If you've just come in from trap, it doesn't matter. Anything is the right occasion to have the mate. And people have the mate maybe 5 or 6 times a day, right? And it's almost always in Argentina, it is a communal thing. You share the mate, and there's a ritual around how the person who shares it is called the cerbador, and they pass it around, it comes back to them, and then they're the ones who always do it. You don't stir it. There's always a certain ritual around it. But I'm thinking, imagine if we had the mate tradition in the United Nations and people were passing around, or in the European Union Parliament, or just, where people were passing the mate, pass it back and come. There's a sense of weaving the conversation, and everyone is like, whose turn is it now? Oh, is it you? Okay, fine. And you pass it, and then you pass it back to the host, the cebador, and I think it's a beautiful community making ritual. Uruguay, our neighbor, tends to have the same idea of the mate. Everyone has their thing and their thing, and they carry it around with. They carry the big this and this plus the container of the yerba. They carry it with them when they go into meetings, the streets. But in Uruguay, it's more a personal thing. I have mine, you have yours. We can have it together, and you have yours, and I have mine. But in Argentina, it is always done and shared. And it's actually, if you don't want the mate, people are like, are you okay? So if you're offered the mate, it is an invitation into conversation, into community. And sometimes if you're feeling sick, you don't want to even be close to somebody in conversation because you might, right? So same kind of thing. But otherwise, it's a matter of trust, of inclusion, of equality, of sharing. And it's, again, this kind of culture, I think, I'm fascinated by. Now, there's also one other thing I wanted to mention to you, Marina, is that it sounds like everybody's so together and communal here, but at the same time, in families, in work groups, in soccer teams, yes, there's this incredible bonding. But then between groups, huge distrust. So trust is a real problem here in Argentina. And I've been talking to friends, and it sounds so amazing how the culture that is existing in Argentina and the history that brought about the kind of awareness and distrust is so similar to what happens in Russia. Very similar history in terms of um, government distrust. The people have no trust of the government, none. And yet they're very, very politically active. But that's partly because they don't trust it. And then there's also this way so interesting that when I was teaching in this doctoral program in leadership and systemic innovation, they're so innovative here. You give them, there's a problem with something that's not working, they'll find a solution to it. And often it involves using, not, they make something to fix it. They don't go to the store and they buy the thing. They fix it in some way, or they add to it and they innovate. It's really incredible. But you ask them to do it in a team, they can do that. But you ask two teams to work together, it breaks down. So there's very little ability to trust others. And that comes from the time when there has this whole solidaridad movement that grew out of the great oppressions from the government historically, where people were, all of their belongings were seized, their money, their bank accounts, right? The money, their possessions, their businesses were seized by the government. And then people were disappeared, right? There's a huge thing that's happened in many areas in South America, but here in Argentina, is very, very strong. Why your son or daughter is gone and can't be found, is taken. So great degrees of distrust, and this happened, historically in the late 1900s, as they call it, and in the mid 1900s as well. So not so much the late, but the mid 1900s as well. And this built a degree of self-reliance, of distrust of others, and of the ability to survive adversity, just to survive. And that attitude is it's so interesting because it's such a contrast with the mate culture, which is much more trusting and inclusive, and but in terms of collaborations, it often is very difficult. And this is one of the things I was saying in the program, the doctoral program. If Argentina could bring its culture into a greater degree of trust and collaboration, the innovation spirit here is incredible. But I think there's a lot of distrust, and it's historically based. People have had such experiences with government, and it continues. And there's a lot of corruption. Oof, terrible, terrible, and short-sightedness in terms of the way in which things are governed, and that comes right down into the way buildings are run, the way the city is run, not just the country, right? So there's a lot um, of difficulty with that still. So the distrust is very high, and the ability to survive is also very high. Um, and then the groups of people who you can trust are very strong, but you have to know who they are, kind of thing. So yeah, yeah, it's a that's a little bit what I can share.
So, so do you think that this distrust to others, sort of aliens, is mostly because of this historical period when so you can't share something with the strangers because they can betray you, or somehow they would let the government know that you did something wrong, and in this case so they would be captured or something, yeah?
Interesting though, it's as I mentioned earlier, there is almost a sense of trust of expatriates who come from other countries to Argentina. There's a welcoming. It's like, okay, there's a real welcoming of people, and an integration. There's an easy to work with others from other countries. So those kind of aliens are fine, but there's a great deal of distrust of other Argentinians. So it's more of a distrust within the country than of people from other countries.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much, and again, there's primary distrust with the government, and it's a sense of it just being a big game, and
Mm-hmm.
how you have to learn how to either manipulate or be manipulated by the government. Um, and so there's that kind of I'm painting a very stark image here. It's not that bad. This is not a terrible situation, but I think it's one that perhaps you also can empathize with, but historically. But it's not again, people are you see people from other countries and other cultures, and there's not a distrust of them. There's very little racial profiling, and little kind of yeah, I don't think frankly, I think there's less racism here than there is in many areas of Europe and of the United States. The United States has a lot of racism, and it's a big issue. Here it's less of an issue, and yet, okay, one area perhaps where there's less tolerance is religiously. So this is a very Catholic country.
Mm.
And there are different religious practices, but by and large, it tends to be, and they're tolerated. But that I think is less. There's less celebration of religious difference here than there is in other countries, and that means less celebration of. It doesn't mean that it's somehow dangerous to have a different religious background. Yeah.
In this case, that's in terms of our area of exploration. It's interesting to clarify if we have such distrust to government and so, sort of skepsis to the ability of changing anything and this high level of corruption. So in this case, how do people deal with their problems? So what about the third sector? What about the maybe local communities or leaders or non-profit organizations who, as we know, for example, in terms of Americas, sort of US or Canada or Europe, or both Europe's and Western part and Slavic part, sort of Eastern Europe as well. So how are the things going with their not political leaders, but social community leaders? And again, if we have a person who really wants to change something, maybe very local, maybe which is connected to his or her neighborhood, what might be done? Could you share some specific stories which maybe you know? And again, I remember this wonderful conversation with the person who worked with the slums in Argentina, but as far as I remember, it was connected, so it was supported by local government or not. So
Yeah.
again, that's just only one case. So could you tell more about how are things going in this case, in this area?
Well, it's a good case to begin with because the vijas, they're called vijas, in Brazil they would be called favelas. They're similar. There is a large gap between the rich and the poor, and there are sections of Buenos Aires, for example, where there are slums which are called the villas. They have their own culture. Maybe ghetto is a better word than slum, because the slum has the implication of them being somehow just full of beggars. And these are people who are very industrious. They have their own, they're just a very poor, they have their own economy, their own subculture, their own ways of being. They're just socioeconomically very low. They have low levels of education and low levels of income, and the build the buildings out of whatever they find. So, but the government is now taking a great interest to try to integrate them more explicitly, because some of these areas are very close to the downtown areas and the major financial hubs and so on. So it's interesting. They're kind of next to each other, separated by a railway, but still. So how to make it so that the perception that those are dangerous places, that full of crime, because frankly, they are not. They are not. They're just socioeconomically less. Now, if you go there and you have your, you're being not smart about showing too much of your richness, it can be offensive, and that it can also be dangerous. Yes, so that is a fact. But I think that's would be any place in the world. Um, in terms of change and responses to the challenge, right? There is a great degree of community self-reliance. So yes, nonprofits, and this came out of the time when the disappearances were happening, when the government was much more of a dictatorship, and with military, and there was very little that people had as a freedom, and where things were taken from them, all of their people who had education or who had even established a great industry and were doing well financially. Many of these people, I've been in taxis with them, and they're like, yeah, my family was like that, but now I'm a taxi driver because we've lost everything. And still there are people who are like that. Now, the country is quite no longer in that kind of depression, for sure. But we've had huge inflation until just recently. I mean, we have had inflation that has been at levels of 120% inflation, which is, talk about 3 or 4% inflation is not good. But that's where the money that you receive from your check in 1 month is worth 100 times less the next month. So people don't save. they have to spend it because if they save it, it's not worth anything the next month. So now it's stabilizing, right? So this is that we've already had a few years where the inflation has dropped now. It's around the 40%, which is still huge, but compared to what it was is much, much better. I think it's even dropping lower than that. The bottom line here is that out of that time when there was such high inflation and there was such insecurity, the need for communities of solidarity, of being able to support themselves, that was very strong. And they still exist. So there are this mentality, this approach of creating, um, for example, you have fairs, and you have where artisans will come and they will share, whether it is making things out of clothing or making maybe more electronics, or they come and they share and they show what they have, maybe not made, but it's traded, and it's usually not traded one kind of goods for another kind of goods. It's usually traded with money. But the point is that they recycle things. They bring things and they share it, and it's used. But and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's made by them, and there are fairs all the time happening in the city, not just on the weekends. The weekends it's poor, but then there are these kind of, and then there are these events that bring people together from other parts of the country to Buenos Aires, also to Cordoba, which is a major city as well, and then there are other cities around the country. So it's not just one, but um, but yes, there's the big difference in the capital from others. So again, just to answer your question, yes, the sense of there are nonprofits, we just had a huge fair called the Bioferia, and it's of all um, organizations, whether they're for profit or nonprofit, whether they're community based or whether they are distributed but based on particular uh, sector of industry, they had to do with nature and had to do with how do we live in harmony with nature. And that was a huge event. And people came from all around the country, but it happens once a year. And amazing the innovations you see there. And then the food is fantastic because you also can go in and it all takes place outdoors. And so it all depends on how the weather is, but it usually has been fine. And so these kind of things bring people together and bring people into community. So there is a lot of that. And there's also still the levels of, yeah, distrust of initiatives, especially if you want to bring one initiative, community in to collaborate with another community. And I don't mean community like geographic community. I mean a community of interest or of action, like um, one group that is working on biomimicry and another group that's working on biomimicry. There's like, okay, so, are you really, and how are you? And there's more distrust with that. But
Is it about competitiveness or not only a sort of clash of interests, but mostly distrust on the level of sort of keeping our secret safe?
yeah, there's a lot of that. It's not so much competitive, but yes, exactly that. They're going to take our secrets. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's less like we want to be better than them, but we just don't want to lose everything again. That's, I think, more the idea. It's like they take our stuff. This has happened all the time, and it's happened repeatedly. Then, no, we don't want that to happen. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's more about that. Yeah.
Have you thought about the ways, so how to overcome this distrust in future? So what could be done in terms of give some relief in this tension and maybe somehow inspire people or make something to shift their mindset to.
Well, mate. Yeah, well, no. I think I think that yes, there are things. Imagine if we could have more conversations with other cultures as well. There's still a lot of Argentina looking inward.
Mhm.
And even though people come from very many different places, it still is like looking what's happening within our country. And I think if there would be more sharing of things like Ubuntu from South Africa, the Sosha and the Zulu traditions, or other aspects of solidarity that come from the Scandinavian nations, or the Sarvodaya Shramadana movement, which is again also very community based, that comes out of India and Sri Lanka. These kind of engagements can, I think, fit well with the cultures here. Let me mention one thing that is across all of, particularly South America, but many different Latin countries, Spanish-speaking Latin countries. It's called Buen Vivir.
Yeah, I just
And
wanted to ask it. Is it
yeah,
isn't not the same? So why it is not used as a matter of uh, coming together and building this trust?
it is. It is. And it is, but you see, particularly in big cities like Buenos Aires, Buen Vivir, which implies a real interdependence with nature, and with not just with nature as a place where you walk in the parks, but with the nourishment that we get from nature. And that by taking care of nature, we take care of ourselves because it nourishes us.
Mhm.
And how do we live with the land? And how are we actually an expression of the land? That's that's at the very heart of Buen Vivir. And it's not so easy to sense that in a big city like Buenos Aires, I think, or any other big city, to say, I'm of this land. Because even though there's a lot of nature and trees and parks, it's fantastic. You're still all the time walking on concrete or on asphalt. There's a lot of cobblestone in the cities, like in Europe as well. The stones that are in the right, which you don't find so much in Mexico or the United States, but many of the streets are made of this cobblestone. And yeah, the street I live on is like that in the middle of the city. Um, so, so even though it has this kind of old world flavor to it, Buen Vivir has the connection with, if we want to nourish ourselves, we need to nourish the world, which will nourish us, which will nourish the. Is this way of living in not just in harmony, but in interdependence with the nourishment of life. And it's not just agriculture. I don't mean it's not like Buen Vivir is not a form of permaculture. It's not, because it's a way of, it's like Ubuntu in that sense, right? It has a lot of exchange commonality with those kind of ways of we are, but it's not just we are a human unity. We are also this unity with the living world. And I think it is still in Buenos Aires as well, but it's like an echo here. It's not as much as could be. So I think these are the ways forward. So for example, the Bioferia that I talked to you about, that huge event that brought people in from all around the country with a 3-day event on all the different forms of natural food, natural clothing, and also they had things of acupuncture and alternate medicine and things of that sort. So it was all about living in harmony, right? And that has a very much of the flavor of Buen Vivir. And I think it flourishes here because of that as a background component. Um, but to answer your question again, I think more connections with other places in the world that can be inspired, because Argentina is very inspired by other countries. They make everything their own. Like this, we have to do it like this, but they're very, very inspired by innovations that come from other places and so on. And then they have to, yeah, make it Argentinian. Let me tell you a little story also about when I went on my first date here with with my fiance now. She took me to a restaurant and I had just come from, I was living in California at the time, and most of my life was pretty much vegetarian. I would have fish occasionally. Very rarely I would have maybe chicken, and hardly ever would I have red meat. And I would never have pork because that's just the way this was my diet, right? So I'm mainly vegetarian. And she took me to a restaurant that was typical, really typical Argentinian because she wanted me to, experience that. And so we went there. Only meat. Only. I mean, there was not even like a little dish of vegetables or salad. No, no, only meat. And it was like lots of different kinds of meat. So she had me try all the different kinds of meats, and I didn't say anything because I'm like, okay, that it's not so easy being vegetarian in Argentina because it's, by the way, one of the countries that is the largest exporter of beef. The cattle industry is huge here, and the high quality meats that you will find in Europe, I know in Italy where my parents live, often it's from Argentina, and wine as well. It's very well known, Argentina, for these aspects. But many more cows in Argentina than people. So, but that's the way the world is these days. There are many more cows in the world than there are people, but still, um, yeah.
Yes, and thank you. To finalize maybe our conversation, at least for today, because I have lots of
Mm.
questions, but I mind mind your time. If the place where you live, be it Buenos Aires, you can look maybe wider. Maybe you would like to narrow it to some specific place in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, some specific neighborhood. So when you are thinking about the place to which you feel that you belong now, which you call your home, and if you could imagine this place as a person, or maybe as a mythical
Nice.
something
Giant. It's a
giant,
giant.
maybe not a giant, so let's not narrow it to some specific character. This might be any
Okay.
mythical beast, or a person, or something alive. So some living, conscious, wise organism. What might it be in terms of vibe, in terms of history, ancestry, energies, maybe a future aspirations? What might it be? Or who maybe it might be?
Well, first I'm going to put it into the body of a person, of a human being, what kind of person this would be, and then I'll put it into an animal. I could also put it into a aspect of nature, but let me stay with the animal and the person. So, as a person, this would be an artist.
Mm.
You know the kind of artist that has the kind of hat that you see with the often in France, you see the hat that is the artist's hat, kind of, it's round and it
Mm.
sits a little bit sideways, on your head, and 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 I would see that this person is always has a keen eye to see things that you might not be seeing. Mm. And they Yeah, it doesn't have to be male or female. It could be either one can wear this hat, by the way. Um, and But they have a flair. There's a certain, they also probably are also a great tango dancer because, right, Argentina is the capital of tango of the world. Um, and There's even an expression here to say, how are you doing? And when the answer is, you say, soy Gardel, and then you add con guitarra eléctrica. So Gardel is the man who made the music for the tango very famous in his guitar, right? And if you want to say I'm really doing great, you can say I'm Gardel, right? I'm like him, right? But when you say with an electric guitar, it's like, wow, you really are doing excellent because I'm like him, but with an electric guitar. So it's like yeah, so that's how you say I'm really doing well. And I think that's a good capture of the kind of spirit that would be here. Yeah. There is also a lot with that of I wouldn't say there's a kind of drama that you would see in like the Mexican soap operas or what's they called the TV soap dramas, right? It's there's a lot of that. That's not here so much, but there is a lot of fire here with and this is where the artist also works with that. There's Latin fire. You can imagine with the games, the soccer games, people get very intense. Now they don't they don't hurt each other. Um, but it gets very intense. Whew. And the same with the politics. Oh, very intense. So if you want to go to like a calm restaurant and or ride the bus and be able to meditate, go to another country. So the restaurants are usually very loud and the buses are usually very loud. So yeah, it's not Northern Europe in those frames. So people are very expressive. All right. In terms of an animal, I would say the jaguar. That's definitely from this area of the world as well. And the jaguar is all of a sudden you'll see it's there because it's very able to come and be, you won't notice that it came. And then that's its ability to be there. And it has a very penetrating gaze. And and it is, but it's very beautiful. It's a very beautiful being, right? But it's also very spiritual. It has a very great spirit power. And I think because Argentina is wild to a large extent. Okay, there's the metropolis here, but like I said, that one third of the population lives here. The rest of this place is and it's a huge place, right? It's as big as Europe entirely, and that's the rest. Two-thirds of the population lives in the rest of the country, but that's still relatively small amount of people distributed, right? And so there's a great degree of wind, of wildness, but people are calm about it. I wouldn't like the jaguar again. It's not a nervous animal. It's not an animal like the gazelle or like the deer or like it's not. It's calm and it's present, and it's connected. So that's where I would put. And let me say one other thing here, Marina, also about this little interview with me is I've lived here now for 12 years. Does that make me an authority in Argentina? So everything I have said has to be understood as my perspective on this place that I have lived in now for 12 years. But I look at the place and I cannot speak as a native. But the problem for me is there's no place in the world where I could speak as a native. As I mentioned to you at the beginning, although I was born in Switzerland, I'm not Swiss. Although I lived in Italy since I was 11. I'm not Italian. Although my education is from the United States, I'm definitely not, and my passport is from the United States, but I'm not a US culture, I don't think. So yeah, but now I'm feeling very much identified with this land and these people. But again, just for any material that you use for others to know about this, I'm not speaking as an Argentinian. I can't do that. I actually recently I was there's a certain gesture or movement that they do here in the games to say, yeah, we're from Argentina, we're the soccer, it's us. And they do this movement. And I was doing it, and with, I was showing that, and my fiance said, yeah, no, you, you don't quite have it. So, no, I'm not completely, they have, when you're from here, you have a different way, and it's really rooted. I still speak with an accent, and my perspectives are clearly that of someone with an accent. So I just want to make it clear that all the things I've been saying are um, of somebody who has a cultural accent on the perspectives on life and on the culture in which they're living. So just to let
Thank
you
you
know.
for this notion, but I think that your perspective is definitely not less precious, because again, we are trying to tap into this um, vibe and energy of the place, and it opens differently to any person. And again, we agreed and discussed that this soul of the place and soul of the city, it could not be complete totally, because as many people as you have, and not only people, but not non-human beings as well. So as many beings you have, these would be the sort of pieces of the puzzle of the whole picture. But at the same time, it's precious. It's important to understand how this land is opening itself to a person, be it a person who came maybe a couple of years ago, or 12 years ago, or 20. So we have we had conversations and interviews with native-born people, as well as people who just moved because of some circumstances not so long
Right.
ago. But it's very interesting how the place, how this, I would like to say the soul, maybe it is sort of it sounds a little bit esoteric, but I definitely feel through these conversations that something bigger than us are speaking through us about the places which we discuss.
Mm. Mm. And I think, Marina, that you are helping bring that out, because the kind of questions that you ask, and also the attention that you put to the flavor of life in these different places, and how that is an expression of the land. I really do think that the land speaks us. The land, it should, right? And it's sometimes not so easy in the city, but I think even in cities, it's still it's still held by the land. It is still breathing the air. The air is part of the land, and the
Yes.
weather and all of this is the place that situates the field of being, and that allows for certain characteristics of expression to emerge. And yeah, I think it's nice to bring that out, and you're helping draw that out in these conversations. So that's very nice. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you for this. And again, through these conversations, I do have maybe a couple of minutes more.
sure, sure, sure.
I just wanted to share that it's interesting that through these conversations with people from different places, first of all, I didn't even expect that there could come sometimes there could come contradictions between the place and the city. So first, it was mentioned by Wanda Krause from Canada. And by the way, we made a wonderful interview with her, because she spent all her childhood in Yukon, in a small city, and she grew up within the indigenous community. So she shared her perspective and her some ideas and worries about this integration and all these things. And at the same time, I conducted an interview with the Russian girl who has been living for 20 years in China. And it's also a huge contradiction between the place, between the nature, and the, I would say, very cruel attitude of human beings towards nature. And it's not only contradiction, it's mostly the damage which people bring to the land.
Right.
So yes, that's one of the sort of research findings which I also found out, experienced now. And by the way, I just wanted to mention it at the end of our conversation. The video which you shared about Ireland. It seems to me that Irish are the most culturally stable people. So we conducted several interviews with them in terms of preserving their culture despite of the fact of globalization delusion, something which is connected to separation with their native lands. So we discussed with several people, and by the way, one of their professional storytellers, Irish storytellers, they are called Sean Keys. So she joined us, and she's very interested in collaboration with Live in Care in terms of using stories as their technique, as the tool of reconnection between people and communities and
Beautiful.
and so she is not only the storyteller, but she's a story weaver. So she works with the large groups of people whom she invites to co-create the stories together. And through stories, it's sort of their psychotherapy where people share and bring some of their experiences and their feelings and their trauma to the big story which they co-create together. And I think that might be a very interesting case maybe for Argentina as well on how to build trust between people who don't trust to each other. And in terms of Ireland, so their strong sense of self-identity, which is not depressed by any historical or political or any other influences. That's very interesting because in comparison to indigenous people, to Aboriginal people from Australia, to even I would say Slavic countries who are also very much influenced by the Western culture nowadays. So this very strong sort of sense of self-identity, maybe rather aggressive sense of self-identity. It's very interesting how they stay connected to it, even when they sort of move to other countries, and even their children who were born in other countries, they still believe that they are Irish and they belong to this culture. So yes, that's very interesting case on how people from all over the world can preserve their roots in themselves.
Well, I think part of what we're doing here in the Living Cities Action Research ecosystem is to weave, and a lot of that is stories, as you're saying, stories that connect. I mean, that's almost a tagline. Stories that connect, but connect to what and connect whom? So I think that a lot of this has to do with the critical existential issues of the 21st century, which for me are all about identity and belonging. These are not the same, but they're completely connected, identity and belonging. And there's so much sense of displacement in our world today. You ask most people who have gone through higher education and live in cities, and you ask them, "Are you indigenous?" They say, "No, I'm not indigenous." Then what? If you're not indigenous, you come from what, another planet? What does that mean? Not indigenous. Everyone is indigenous, right? Everyone is, but not in the same as those who are autochthonous, right? Which have they can trace their roots and their heritage to this place. We can all trace our roots and our heritage to the planet Earth and to some place, right? So that's fine. And yet, and I have mentioned to you that I don't feel I belong to any particular society or culture because I have these narrow or these shallow roots. Let me mention something about the roots in a moment, but the idea of stories that connect, and you think about Ireland, they have these strong stories, and it goes directly into myth and into magic and into, the magical beings. There's not necessarily a fear, but there's awe. And that awe has a sense of respect. And you don't go and mess up certain areas of nature because there are beings there. That sense of interdependence, connection, spirit connections as well. These stories that weave us together, often the holders of those are not the cosmopolitan people, but the autochthonous indigenous people who are from the land, who are tribal in their ways of being and in their stories. And they are often in South America looked to as big brother. Interestingly, that they are big brother, they are older brother, they are older than, yes, and it's true, their societies and civilized, they're coming from civilizations that have been overturned, but that are much older in the traditions that they maintain, the stories that they tell each other and themselves. Often these are now small communities that are living in the tropical or subtropical areas. And again, Argentina has a lot of the Amazonian peoples and are also part of the northern part of Argentina. And in the southern, you have the Tierra del Fuego, where you have a lot of also rich traditions, although the population of autochthonous indigenous people was decimated there because of disease and other things. But the point is that the stories of the land come very strongly from these holders, from older brother cultures. And it's interesting that in Ireland, those are woven right into the people who are in the even in metropolitan areas and things of that sort. You don't have to go looking for them so much. It's part of their culture. So that's nice, those stories. But they are the same as the Picts, right? PICS or PICTS, the Picts, who are the original Aboriginal people from Northern Europe. Lived there before others had come there from either Asia or from Southern Europe. Those traditions and that memory, that remembering, bringing that membership back in, and then that restoring, you restore and restory your connections to the world. Last thing I want to say on this, Marina, is that I once went to a seminar that a colleague of mine, Stanley Krippner, gave a seminar on the multicultural child. I said, "Oh, I want to go to that. I feel like that. That's good." So I went to this, and everyone was talking about how, let's say, and I actually remember somebody explicitly saying this, that their mother is from Ireland and their father is from Ghana in Africa. And it's very different cultures, but they feel at home in both places. And if they go to one place, they can kind of descend. They feel like a tree that has roots that connect like this, and that they can go down into one set of roots if they need to, and they can go down into the other set of roots when they're in the other place. And I'm thinking, what are my roots? And I don't feel like a tree, but I feel like maybe like grass with lots of little roots that are very spread out. I told you, my father Hungarian, mother Swedish, born and raised in Finland. Me from Switzerland, my brother from Germany, having lived in Italy. Again, this is just all over. So I don't have a place that is my roots. I can't say, these are my people, right? Which makes it really difficult when the Olympics come on, because I'm like, yeah, go Nigeria. And be like, are you from Nigeria? No, I just like the way they're playing. So you can't do that. You're not from here. So it's like, well, where am I going to say I'm from? So it's difficult. But I think this is part of the weaving, and that sense of, again, identity and belonging. It's certainly a quest of mine, right? And I can come to the idea that I belong on Earth. Maybe sometimes I'm not, but still that, and sometimes I don't identify with human beings. I identify more with the dogs and the other things, but still I can identify with life here. And how can we reconnect these stories? And this is the last thing I want to say here is that the stories that connect, but what do they connect us to? If they connect us to competition and high technology and not living things, that's not the buen vivir kind of stories, right? That bring us into places of heart. And the land always has heart. And even in the cities, we can hear that pulse of the land where we are. And I don't mean the physical land that the buildings are sitting on. I mean the country, the land, the place. There's always heart. And this is the nice thing about the stories that you were telling me about from Ireland. The heart is very strongly beating there. You can hear it in the stories. So how can we bring these stories into our common pulse so that we can hear the beautiful differences in our stories, but also the common rhythm that is part of what it means to be on a human being on the planet at this time. Yeah. Nice.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for this summary. I would say conclusion. Great conclusion.
Mm.
Yeah. I even don't want to add anything, just to be with it, you know.
No, that's nice. Yeah.
So it's maybe not like you are not like a grass, but like a mycelium, you know, that sort of
Yes.
huge mycelium,
Right.
connecting all different lands together.
Well, people have said that I'm a fun guy, a fun guy, a fun guy.
Be a beautiful play of words.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, thank you,
Well,
thank you
thank
so
you
much.
for this, and thank you for doing this, Marina, because the world needs this. This is the ambrosia. This is that, and we think we need the money and the power. No, that disconnects us from life. We need things that connect us to spirit. This helps us remember that essentially we're spiritual beings. We're not essentially material beings. But if we think we're material beings, I just my body and my things, then we get stuck in the superficial. But when we know that we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, it's a different thing. And we have to remember that. So these are the kind of stories that connect us through spirit. Now, you see there, up there, Spirit Week. We need to make it spirit life.
Yes. Great. Spirit eternity, I would say.
Yes, indeed. 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 This is our dance. Thank you for the opportunity to dance with you.
Yeah,
We have to.
thank you for sharing. It was very powerful. And please, could you share with me not only the recording, but also the full transcript? I
Right,
checked
I
that
will.
it does the full transcript, not the summary, but word to word. So I use it to play with it with AI in
Perfect.
order to create the story, which contains everything which I sort of pointed out for me was
I will
important.
send you everything that I get from this. So I think since you started the recording, the recording may go to you. I think the transcript will come to me. If the recording comes to me, I will send it to you, of course, as well. But whatever I have from this, I will send to you. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it should be used because you stayed the host, and the host is making the tra-
Okay.
the recording and the transcription as well.
Even though you started the recording?
No, it started recording to your cloud, not to mine.
Oh, okay. Good. I will share it as soon as I
Wonderful.
have it.
Looking forward. Please send it to me as soon as possible, and I will start
I will.
creating the text.
As soon
Thank
as
you.
it comes in, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
You
So
want by
my
email then? By email or by
yes.
WhatsApp? Or...
No matter. Just send me the link or anything. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All
Thank
right.
you. Greetings to Valerie, and I hope that
I'll
you will
let her know. I'm
have
sorry she wasn't here. I told her all about it and she was like, oh, this is very good. But again, she's at the university, which is actually in another. It's another part of the city. If this wasn't such a big city, you would say it's another city because it takes her about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get there. So, but
next time, because I think that it's great to continue. And again, based on our conversations, my questions to her would be more.
That's right. That's right. I'm sure that you could have, because if she were here and she would hear me say things, she would be like, "What?" So I don't know. I don't know how much my perspectives are representative of Argentina, but definitely they are my perspectives. They're my perception.
And that's the value of them.
Yeah. All right. Big hugs to
Thank
you.
you.
Be
Big
well.
hugs. Bye-bye.
Bye.